This is Josh with Logic Chronicles, and now I'm going to show you how to create my dialogue system. Unfortunately, I'm just having some problem actually starting a new project and having my microphone work at the same time. I do not know why. But this is just a simple third-person template. I'm using 4.18 right now. Yeah, so just a third-person template. I have absolutely no starter content. It's not really needed unless you want to have to test audio. But even so, you can just record something of you speaking the dialogue and import it into Unreal, and then just use it or whatever. But you won't really need any starter content unless you want to test with some dialogue, with some audio that you didn't make yourself. All right. So to start with this, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start over here and create a whole other folder. Now, just a little word of warning: this won't be able to be, because of the way it's worked. I've made some widgets and stuff like that, and you can't. For whatever reason, whenever I try to put it into a plugin and trying to use it that way, my thing always crashes. So you're gonna have to import this whole entire folder, which is one reason why we're doing this, and two, keep organized because it's important. But anyway, we're gonna make this dialogue content. But yeah, so we have this folder right here. Now within here, what we're going to do is we're just going to make a couple subfolders, just looking ahead, just to make things easy in life. We're going to have context object as one folder within the content folder. Alright, so then what we're also going to do is we're going to make a library. Now this isn't technically a library in the same coding sense. All we're going to have in here is one interface, but just for me, what I do is I usually just lump all my interfaces, my macro and function libraries into one folder and call it library, just because it's easy and why not. Probably not the best thing to do. Maybe some people don't like it, but that's what I do. We're gonna have another one called vars. This is gonna be where we put we're gonna make some structs and some enums and put those in here. So short for variables. And then what we'll have is widget. Put our widgets in there. All right. Now, what we're gonna need for this is we're just gonna create all the smaller sub-content that we're actually gonna use in this now, because that way we won't have to worry about coding it later on. So first things first is in here, what we're actually gonna do is we're going to go to class. Now, if you're coding, if you coded with actual code, this will probably be familiar to you. But if you use Unreal, you're probably gonna use most of these, and you're not really gonna look at this too much. If you don't know what an object is, this is kind of like the base class. All right, it's very basic. There's very few things that are actually included in here, but we're gonna use this kind of create a context, okay? And by that context, if you remember when I was talking about in the intro, I have two. I have a root context and I have a sub context, right? But we'll make two of these, alright? And I'll explain this as we go. Now we're gonna name this root dialogue context underscore object. Alright. We're gonna leave this right there right now. And we're gonna create another one. And here we'll say dialogue subcontext underscore object. Now, make sure they're not childed to each other, or this isn't a child of that. These are two different things. I know I called it subcontext. It should probably find a better name for it, but it's whatever. Okay. I got my window open on the other side here. Actually, before I do that, we'll create an interface right now. And we'll come over here to blueprints and nice interface. We'll say dialogue underscore interface. Alright. So that's the only thing that's going to be in this folder. Like I said, it's not technically a library, but who cares? Okay. So yeah, variables. Now under variables, we're going to need a couple of them. We're going to make one struct, or one enum first, sorry. And we'll say dialogue, actually call it command underscore enum. I named it something in my original project, something a little different, but this will make a little more sense actually. So I'm going to open this up. Now, generally what I like to do, well, we're going to need, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. Alright, I need 4. Now, it's actually pretty cool how they actually added that in this release. That is so nice. But anyway, so for this, I like to tend to put the normal case first. For if you haven't used enums before, basically it'll let us switch cases, and we'll have several execution pins coming off of each of these. And depending on what this enum value is, we can actually switch. If it's this case, it'll go off there, and so on. Now, I generally like to have my first enum named whatever the most common case is possible. Like if I have it basically the enum set to this, generally this would be default. You know, nothing special with that. Now the next one will be main root. One after that will be switch, and now we need end. Alright. The whole point is this will be like if everything's going normal, we'll just kind of keep cycling through. If we need to go to that main conversation, that's what this one is going to be used for. If we need to switch conversations within what we're doing, that's what this is for, and this is to actually end the conversation. We're going to add an audio one, okay? An audio struct. Now this is, the only real point of this is to get those different voices like I was telling you about. And what I'll do, I named that horribly on my other folder. Dialogue. So this will be dialogue audio underscore struct. Alright. So we have dialogue audio struct. Now, within here, what we'll do is we will add a byte. Oh, actually, we're going to call it voice first. No. Voice. Alright, we have a voice, or we have a byte. And the reason why I'm using this is because you can actually hook up an enum to this. And the idea would be, you know, if you have different races, and you can just put it in a separate enum in and of itself, and then you can hook this up to this variable, which we'll get to that later. But you can hook it up to this and actually use the enum to kind of refer to whichever voice or whichever one you want. Alright? And then what we'll do is we'll go to sound base. Now this is like the I guess like the root level like sound I guess you can have. It's not a sound clue or anything like that. It's just very basic sound. Okay. So the way we'll kind of think of it, right, is as soon as something comes in here, if you have a character that's say a race of a human, and they're speaking some sort of dialogue, it'll you'll input that here, so it'll basically say, okay, well, voice 1 would be human, say, and this would be the audio you need to play for a human speaking this line. Whereas this one, say it's an elf or something, the elf would say this instead, like their voice would be different, but it'd be saying the same exact text. All right. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Yeah, should. Well, yeah, kind of. It'll make. If it doesn't make sense now, hopefully it'll make sense when we're actually using this. Okay. Next, what we'll make is another struct, and this struct will be let's say units answer underscore struct. Now this unit answer struct, this is what's actually going to be displayed on the screen as your this is going to be what's displayed. This is what you're going to use to actually display information on the screen. I'm actually making my naming conventions actually match what I actually had before, because my original project, it was a bit messy. Oh, hold up, sorry. There that goes. Okay. Because I actually went back and forth, because I called it display dialogue, and then I called it, you know, it got kind of annoying actually naming it that, because then it's like I had a display, what was it called? I had like a display event and stuff like that, and it was just messy naming. So calling it question and answers kind of felt more natural. But anyway, we'll have display text. This is, you can kind of see here if you're using display answer, or you're looking display unit display answers, and then it just you have display text, and it's just annoying keeping track of what I'm actually looking at sometimes. But anyway, so here we have the string. We're gonna have this to be an array of strings. So you can basically what it'll be is like this will be like the first whatever needs to be said first will be here. So you have some part of dialogue. Say you can't fit it into one run through, so you put the rest of it into the next one. The next one's the next one, and what it'll do is it'll cycle through each of these depending on, it'll keep track of which integer we're on and just keep going through. Alright, now we have another one. We'll just call this audio. And we will make this an integer and go to a map. The reason why I made this an integer is because just to keep it separate. So it's first off, it's an integer, and we're actually going to keep track of which index we're on. So we can pull the index from here, and that index will also correspond to this map. Now from that, each of these will need its own call it audio dialogue right there. That'd be that struct that we just made. So you'll see here what's kind of put one there. Okay, this would be kind of weird because you might have to do it backwards or so, but anyway, you'll see here we've got one line of text right here, one, and we got two, right? So it'll go through, it'll take this line of text, and it'll find that 0 index, and it'll come down here, and this is the 0 index. Now what it'll do is it'll come down here and figure out which voice should I use for that, right? So remember, this is this is an actual integer, this is a byte. So I'll come in here and I'll say, okay, for the 0 index, we'll find that 0 index audio, and we'll find the voice that's associated with that, and it'll use that. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. What we're gonna do is we're gonna actually have a couple names here, and the first one will be question ID. And the whole idea is we're actually going to be looking up what a set of responses that we want to be able to ask, or a set of questions that we want to ask. And this is how we'll actually look up those questions. We'll throw another one down, and this one is mainly for you to later on and actually expand this sort of thing. And I'll show you how to, at the end, I'll actually show you how to kind of actually put in more logic into it. Alright? But this will be a reference, a logic reference, you know. The whole idea is you'll basically have this in as a name. Actually, let's put it as a string right now because that'll be more useful later on. This could be a stringlet. Now we'll leave it as that. Now, this logic reference, you'll be able to take this as a string and you'll be able to parse it and try to figure out sort of information later. And if you have no idea what I just said, hopefully when we actually do it, you'll understand what I'm saying. Now we'll do another one. We'll say this one will be answer command, and this will be the command enum. So the whole idea is after it goes through all this dialogue, it'll come here and figure out which type of what do you want to do next after the dialogue. That's why I call it a command. Maybe not the best name for it. Could probably call it something else, but whatever. And then from here we can choose: should I continue it normally? Should I go back to the root of the conversation? Should I switch to another sub conversation, or should I just end it? And that's what it'll kind of do. It'll figure it out through there. We'll do another one, and we'll say switch sub context. So this will be if you wanted to actually, if you say here you wanted to actually switch the conversation, we'll actually put the class of whichever subcontext we actually want to do. Dialogue subcontext. You want to make sure it's just a class reference right here. That one. You don't need any array on that. So basically, as we start making these, you just kind of put in whatever you want it to switch to. All right. Now, hopefully this doesn't all seem too abstract right now. It'll make more sense as we keep doing this. Next, we need another struct. Say units question underscore struct. Make question underscore struct. So this one, what we'll have in here is we're just gonna have three things. We are gonna have the display. Let's say display question. And just so you keep this in mind, I call it a question, but this could be technically a statement. You know, whatever you want the way you kind of want to think about this is The question is whatever the player wants to try to use to ask the NPC, or try to like say, hey, if I click this option, what is the NPC gonna say, sort of thing. All right. Now, what we need is another name. Actually, that is string. I already switched it. All right. So we'll have this first one right here. The display. Wait, what am I doing? Answer ID. Answer ID. So this will be essentially after we pick an answer, this is what the NPC should be saying. Then after that, logic reference. So again, this will be the same sort of idea where you can actually parse this and actually figure out some logic later. Alright. Now, there is one other problem that we need. There's one more struct we have to make, and it's because of a problem, and it's because maps don't go to arrays. Like, if you see here, you don't need to copy this, but if I'm doing this right here, say I have an integer, I have a map, well, I can't really go to another array over here, which is what we're going to need. Alright? Because, unfortunately, you can't have a map going to another array, but what you can do is you can make a struct. You can have a map go into a struct and have that struct be an array. And I'll show you why in a second. But we'll say question array underscore struct. And this one will be just one variable. And that one variable will just simply be what we did over here. That lasts an array of the units unit option or unit questions. Array. Questions and then array. Okay, alright. And alright, so we got that. So we'll close this screen, which you cannot see. The widgets we won't worry about for now. But what we will do is we will start actually working in the context. Okay. So first things first, in the root context. Okay, let me open this all up. Sorry for taking a bit. Throw this in here. Okay. Now, what we want to start with is we want to throw in 4 variables in here. Now the first one, well, actually, did we already create that? That is another question. No, we did not. Before we create that, let me just throw two other things out here just to make things simple before we start scripting and all that. We'll come here to classes and go to actor class, and we'll call this dialogue. And now we'll create a normal actor. Call this dialogue logic for actor. Okay. So this one right here is going to be mainly for you to keep track of things that are going on. Like if you want to keep track of variables, like did the player already have a conversation with have this conversation? Do you want to block it off, or do you want to keep it going? Or if you want to put a whole bunch of functions in here for like say you want to have a function here to check, okay, is the skill level high enough to actually succeed or fail and all that. You want to put it in here. And there's 2 reasons why. The first reason why is because this will be something that'll be spawned and it'll actually stay like persistent. All of these smaller contexts, we're going to be spawning them and despawning them as we need. So you can't really hold any variables in here because it'll get erased. So this is kind of where you want to actually put all your like variables that you want to keep track of. And then you want to somehow record all that information, throw it inside of some sort of save file, and then when you spawn this, get all that information and put it back in here. Alright? So that'll make more sense as we go. But back to this one. Okay. Get this back over here. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll put a dialogue components. Now what we need is we need actual this. Alright, so we need the actual component right here. And we'll hit editable and expose on spawn. So every single time we actually create this object or we construct it, we'll actually pass the component into here. Alright. This is going to be kind of important for later on. Now we need to create another variable. Let's say sub context, and this will be of the class subcontext class reference. Okay. Now we want this to be a set. Now, if you haven't used sets already, basically a set is just an array that holds only one copy of whatever you're using. So like if I come here, if I try to do it again, see it won't let me do it. But if I add this one, do it again, I can add it. I can't because I already have nothing here. If I had another one, I can keep going, but it just makes sure there's no duplicates in here. Alright. Now what we'll also do is we'll say base sub content, and this one will be just a regular one. And then we'll add one more. I'm gonna say greetings. So this greetings will be just double check here. It's going to be answers, the answer struct, and we'll make an array of this. So once we start actually having a conversation, it'll pull this out first, and you can use however method you want. Whatever method you want of actually getting a greeting and figuring out what you want to start off the conversation with. And then after that, it'll go to this, pull out the information for this conversation, and then once you want to switch conversations, they'll all be contained in here. Okay. Hopefully this is starting to make a little more sense. What we'll also do is we will go into this next one over here. Alright, let me just get this pulled up on the other screen. Here we only need 3 things to start off. Now we need a questions. We'll call this a map, or actually we'll go to name. We'll go to map. And this one will be questions, unit questions that we've actually created. Actually, no, it will not. This one will be the array. Question array, right here. So, here's what I was trying to explain before, right? So we're gonna use the name to kind of reference which set of questions we want, right? Then within here, we'll have a couple different options of questions, of responses that we want to say. Okay. So this will be one set of questions we can ask. And if I just throw one right there, and then if I go here, this over here will be a different set of questions that we can ask. So this will all be displayed at once, and we'll actually I'm gonna finish making these variables, and then what I'll do is I'll just kind of fill this out of what I had already showing you from when I was first doing the intro for this, just so we have some things to test with, and I'll show you how this works after that. All right. Now next ones we need answers. Alright, answers. Okay. And this one needs to be answer. There's unit answer. This will be everything that this conversation can hold. This will be everything that this conversation can hold. So this will be one response that the NPC can say. This will be another response, and this will be another response. You want to make sure that within this conversation right here, this subcontext, or this subconversation, which it probably should be called. But anyway, within this subconversation, this is everything the NPC can say. Alright? And over here, these will be groups of questions that you can actually ask the NPC. So this will be group of questions number 1. This will be group of questions number 2. Okay? That's kind of how you want to think about this right now. Alright? With that, what we'll also do is we will make another variable, say root context, and we'll make this a single variable. And we'll say root dialogue context right there. And then with that, we also want to expose this on spawn, make it editable. So once we make this thing, we'll actually put this inside of here and fill it in, so that we can then use that later on. And you'll see later how this will all fit in. All right, we're gonna make 2 more functions. We're gonna make 2 functions in here. First one is get question. And so get question. Okay. Now, the first thing that we're gonna do is we're actually gonna pull off these questions, and we'll say find. Now, what we want to do is just throw this right here into here, and we'll say question ID. What is that? There we go. That'll look weird. Okay. Well, the question ID, and we'll say return, and we're gonna break this. So now we're just gonna this way, instead of actually returning the whole struct, we'll just break the struct right away and just return all the available questions you can ask. And we'll also throw this in there too. You know, did it find it? If it was contained within here, if it actually found it, this would be true, and we know that we actually got this response, or that we're looking up this set of questions and we actually got that. Okay. Now, there's one other thing we need to pass in here. This would be a string. We'll say that this one was that logic reference. Yep. We're not going to touch that right now. The main reason for this is so that we can actually override this later on. And depending on, like I said, depending on what this is, we're going to be looking for questions. So what we can do is we can actually override this function later on. If you've never done that, I'll explain later how that works. Like later on, when I actually show you how to use this. Okay. Well, we can basically come from here and say find substring. We can actually look. When something's passing here, we have some sort of string. Let's say, does it contain skill? Or this is not the one I want actually. Oh, wish I remember exactly what it's called. But basically, I'm gonna look for it on the other screen while I explain this. What it's gonna do is something will come in here, and we're gonna search if within this string does it have that. Like if I have a sentence going on here, does that sentence contain the word string right there? Is what that's doing. Oh, that's why, because I didn't use it that way. Well, there's another way you can do it. So this is what I was talking about. Sorry about that. This is what I was talking about. You can search the string, and you can see if it contains a smaller string. So if I have a sentence, I throw it in here. If that sentence contains the word, skill, this will be yes or no. And then I can figure out, since it contains the word skill, I can do some logic after that, which would be kind of useful. So you can pass multiple things in here. So like if you want to like really narrow it down, you can say, all right, does it contain this? Does it contain a person's name, and so on? If that's all true, you can do something with it. All right. That's just one approach to it. There are some other ways you can kind of go about it, but that's just what this is for. So you can actually later on you can override it and do that. All right. I've probably repeated myself like 5 times, but that's okay. Now we're going to go on to the next function. And this next function will be not here. It'll be in the other one. Okay, so we got that. Now we want to go and make an answer. So we'll get a get answer. Okay. Now from here we are going to grab our answer right here. Say find. Okay. So now that we have found this, we're going to put that in here. And we'll say answer ID. We have that. Now we also want to throw a string in here and say logic reference. Alright, now that we got that, we're going to add one more. And we'll say roots. We don't actually need that actually, because we're gonna put it in here anyway, so it'll be here. So I had it over here in my original project, but since it's here, basically what I was gonna do is have it so this right here is in here. So you can just pass it in, and then you can use it out here. But since it's already here, we don't need that. Alright, and then we will return. Now you might be thinking, well, why in the world would we do this? This is so simple. I can just do this whenever. The reason why is because so we can override it. So the reason why is so that this, after we get in, we just want whatever, when we're getting this this answer back, or whatever this answer should be back, we don't actually want to care what it is. We just want to use it right away. We don't really want to have to worry about, okay, was it contained in here? well, we'll worry about is it contained in here later because we're in that found, but we don't want to worry about having to adjust what the answer should be. So if I'm looking for a specific type of answer, what I can do is say, okay, well, normally I can do whatever, or I can look here in the string and say, okay, is this something quest related? Do I need to have multiple answers depending on, you know, what you've said before? Like if you picked an answer that seems more like an evil villain, I might want to give you one response. If I pick something that requires a skill and you failed the skill, well, I can pass that in here, say failed, and now I can pick a different option and send it through. Okay? That's the reason for this. So like later on when you're actually doing this, what we'll do is we'll make a bunch of child classes of this, and we'll actually keep overriding that function and put whatever logic we need in it. Okay? So that'll be for that. Now this next part right here, we'll go into the root dialogue context, and we'll finish up in here, and then we won't really have to worry about the rest of it. This is going to be really simple, really. What we'll do is we'll just have one, we'll say get random greeting, and type get random greeting. Alright, get random greeting. Sorry about that. Okay. And in this get random greeting, it's going to be a really, really simple thing here. We'll say get this. We'll say last index. We'll pull off here and say random index and range. Plug this last in. So basically all arrays, it should have at least a minimum of 0. If there's absolutely nothing in the array, then that's problematic. You should set this up beforehand, but basically the lowest possible number that's going to be in this array is 0. That's the lowest index we're possibly going to have. And whatever this last index should be the maximum index that we can go. So it'll pick a number randomly between that, and then we'll just return this. And the only reason for this is kind of like a default backup thing. Alright, so by default, this is how one of your NPCs will always start a conversation. They'll actually always start a conversation by getting a greeting that's randomized from their list of greetings that they can possibly have. So you might have one greeting that's like this, and say like hello, right? You might say hello. You might come here and say I hate you, or whatever, right? You can pick out whatever greetings you want. He'll basically pick this up by random, and that's kind of how you'll start conversations. Okay? But again, this was the default version. What we'll do actually is say get greeting. And with this again too, this is something more for overriding. So you can just call this and whatever, you can make child classes of this, and you can override this function, but you know that'll make it simple, so we don't have to worry about like, you know, casting and stuff like that too much. Now we'll actually take this random one. We should probably turn this into a pure while we're at it too. It's kind of important. And then say return. So by default, if we don't actually override this function, it'll always just grab this, get a random one, and return it. But if we need to, we can do some other logic, like we can get this dialogue component. We can figure out who it belongs to, figure out, you know, their class. You can figure out their skills, and then what faction they belong to, and do different things like that. Which would be something cool we can do. All right. Now these next ones are some that I made that I never used because I redid this project a couple times. But that's that. All right. Now just to don't save anything. Oh crap! I closed it. So sorry about that. And that'll be it for this video, really. Next, we'll focus on working on this component act. We'll actually work on this component. This logic actor, we're not going to touch a whole lot, like almost at all. This will be later on for when you actually need to do stuff, and we'll only touch it at the end when I show you how to actually use this. But from here on, we're just going to worry about this component right here, until we're ready to start actually making our widgets. Alright? So, see you next time.